Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Basschaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. There are a lot of great things that are going to be happening on today's show. But first of all, I want to tell you about a couple of things. I want to thank everyone who wished me a happy birthday. I got some great gifts, and we're going to start getting some of these things, and people are sending us things, and we're going to try to set it up where everybody can see these things. We're always trying to get better on the Basschaplain Fishing Podcast here. And I thank all of you who have given me things to put up, and I hope to get those where you can see them all soon. Now, we are breaking in a new microphone, and this microphone is super sensitive, so you're going to have to really kind of bear with me. I'm just learning the ins and outs of how this thing's going to go, and so I'm clanking around, and we're hearing everything, but we're going to get that worked out, so we appreciate your patience on that. Another big thing we've got coming up in the Basschaplain fishing world is our boat giveaway. Now, we earn most of the money for our funding comes from our boat giveaway. This will be the fifth bass boat that we've given away. The drawing is on December the 17th. It is a fully rigged Nitro Z18 bass boat with a 150 Mercury, double power poles, 2 graphs, and a Lowrance Ghost trolling motor. This thing it's the best 18-foot boat that you can possibly get. And we're going to give it away on December the 17th. Now, if you're interested in supporting this ministry through the Bass Boat Giveaway, you can go to chriswells.org and you can buy your ticket. And hopefully I will be pulling up into your driveway sometime in late December with a great Christmas present of a brand new rig bass boat. But be absolutely assured that every dollar that we raise is going to go to try and minister to the bass fishing world. Things like this podcast, things like funding me on the BassMaster tournament trail, ministering to anglers and their families. And we do appreciate everything that you do. Now, today's show, I always say that I'm excited about my guests, but I'm really excited for you today because when I got into the bass fishing industry as the bass chaplain, I had no idea about all the behind the scenes things that has to happen to be able to make all the coverage, the enormous coverage that we have on professional bass fishing today happen. Today's guest is one of the pioneers of that coverage. Now, you may have seen him on a show called Loudmouth Bass with Mark Zona back in the ESPN days, or maybe you know him from bassgold.com, or maybe you're a subscriber to the BassBlaster. But we have on our show today the BassBlaster himself, Jay Kumar. Now, you're going to learn things about Jay. Now, Jay is not a guy who ever toots his horn. He's one of the most humble guys I've ever met. And when you go to shows, he's always behind the scenes. He's doing interviews. And it's always tough for a guy who is an interviewer to interview an interviewer. So that's going to be fascinating today because Jay doesn't like to talk about himself a lot. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Well, you're gonna find out some things about Jay today that you had no idea, about, and it's going to be a fun show today. BassBlaster Jay Kumar coming up next on the Basschaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Basschaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. Today, I have as my guest, my good friend, my brother in Christ, and a guy that I have really come to admire more than I could possibly tell you. Jay Kumar, the BassBlaster, is here. Welcome, Jay. We are so awesomely excited to have you on the Basschaplain Fishing Podcast.
Well, you can't be as excited as me, Chris. Thanks for having me, man.
I appreciate you coming and being on. Now, listen, it's always hard whenever I talk to you in a formal setting, because I've tried to interview you kind of at the Classic when we were at the Classic and I had the Basschaplain booth set up. It's always tough for a guy that interviews people to be interviewed. And the thing about you, this is what I've noticed, you don't ever toot your own horn. You don't ever do that. And today I'm going to toot your horn, so you're going to have to play along with me. And so, we're going to get going. But, first of all, last night, I want to tell you, I went with my son. I went with my 19-year-old to the REO Speedwagon Styx Loverboy concert. And so this morning, I am loving every minute of it. And so I know that you're you appreciate a good rock and roll group as well, and it was a blast. We had a good time, no pun intended. But anyway, Jay, you are what I deem is a media mogul in the outdoor bass fishing world, and there are a lot of other things you do. But first of all, how did a New Jersey guy get involved in bass fishing, man? What's the deal with how did you get into bass fishing? I mean, are you, did you tournament fish? What's your story about bass fishing?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a very similar story to everybody, and then also way different. So I firmly believe that the things that we love are put on our heart by the Lord, right? So I
Yeah.
love bass fishing for the same reason you do, right?
Right.
We were born that way.
Yeah.
You because people who aren't born that way, you can't make them understand the love of bass fishing. You either have it or you don't, or fishing in general. So that's that. The other part of it is, I mean, I'm the child of two immigrants, right? So
Right.
my dad is from India, which is where I get this last name and tan from. And then my mom is from Ireland, and that's where I get the sense of humor from, I guess. But they met here in Boston at college, and they both immigrants, like I said. So neither one of them fished, bass fished, none of that stuff. But they said the first time they took me fishing, because back then, fishing was what you did with your kids when you had free time, and now there isn't as much free time, So anyway, they took me fishing, and they said my eyes got as big as pie plates when that bluegill came up, and that was it. I don't know, I was 3 or 2 or whatever. So then fast forward to bass fishing. I mean, I think it was just I caught a couple bass. I used to fish every day during the summer when school was out. We had a little pond across the street from our house in the park. And occasionally we'd catch a bass, and it was the greatest thing in the world. And I would beg my mom to take me to this other lake that I couldn't ride my bike to. You had to drive there, to fish for bass. And I remember being in high school, being in a bookstore. I've told this story before. And on the magazine stand, I saw BassMaster magazine, and I could not believe it, Chris. I was like,
yeah,
there are people who love to fish for bass
yeah,
like me, and there's a whole magazine about it. So after that, I was all in. I had no idea, there wasn't really, I mean, it's nothing like it was now. There was no tournament
yeah.
scene. There was no great TV. There sure wasn't any internet,
Right.
So, yeah, that's kind of the short version, man.
Well, man, it's amazing because we had Ray Scott um, pass away this year, and I always talk with people. It's stunning to me how much one day in an insurance salesman's life, where he's in a hotel cooped up, and he has this vision to have the Bassmaster tournament trail. How many people that affected? I mean, that affected you. It affected me. It affected so many, literally hundreds of thousands of people, throughout the world with this great sport of bass fishing. And I meet up with it too. So I want to get into all the things, and I know we can't get into all the things, but you are involved in so much. Now I'm going to backtrack the little story about how I met you. But I first saw you when on Loudmouth Bass with Zona, and so and when ESPN bought Bassmaster, I was just addicted every day, and all the different things that you guys tried and all the different things. But that was the first place that I ever saw you, and I was always watching and always. I mean, I was an authority back then. I would say that I wasn't at the level of Ken Duke, but I was very, very close to that level of trivia and stuff like that. But the first time I really met you face to face, I don't know if you remember this or not, but it was at the Bassmasters Classic down in New Orleans, and
Yeah.
you walked up to me, and this is what you said. You said, "Hey, you're with the Fishers of Men guys." He said, I just recently gave my life to the Lord, and I'd like to meet you guys. And I was like, wow, this is Jay Kumar, and he's coming up. And so that's kind of how we met. But all the media stuff you do, before we get into your faith, let's talk about the things that you've done. Now, the things that I know.
Wait, Chris,
Yeah,
Chris,
yeah,
Chris.
go ahead.
I got to give my highlight of that meeting you.
All right.
at the Fishers and Men booth. The thing that I remember about that was you were adamant that Christians will be persecuted.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
And you're right, but I was like, whoa, dude. I
Yeah.
don't, that was a lot of aggro right there.
You
No,
know,
but
I get adamant about a lot of things Christian. I don't get adamant about a lot of other things, but when it comes to Christianity, I do I do have a problem of getting adamant about the things that I believe.
it was great, man. It was funny looking back on it. And you were dead right, man. I mean, of course you are. I mean, now I know that, but at the time I didn't.
Well, it's amazing how, the Bible says that we're going to get more and more persecuted. But anyway, we won't get off on that right a second. But your media things that you do. Now, I'm going to bring out some things that a lot of people don't know. Let's go back to your parents. Now, your grandmother was an author. Is that correct?
It's actually my mom's dad was an author.
Oh, your mom's dad. Okay. Now, how did I messed that up, but I did get to that part. Tell me about that. So you're a writer and you've written so many different things and so many different types of venues that I'm sure a lot of people don't know. You're a novelist. You've written a novel. I actually own that novel and I looked for it today. And I remember I lent it to a friend of mine, which neither a borrower or lender be, but I lent it out. But you've written a novel. You've written so many things, with Bass, Bass Gold and bassfan.com and all the things that you've done. Tell us a little bit about your writing and your media journey. I want to hear about that.
Yeah, well, it's way too much to kind of boil down real quick, but I will say in general, I've done every single media that there is other than major motion pictures. I mean, you name it, data products, daily products, print, TV, whatever you can, digital, of course, anything you can name, I've done it. And which is now like, that's all of that is digital now. The novel writing thing, man, I don't know if that was just in the blood or I had to get it out. The days of like my maternal grandfather, being a rock star writer in those days, I mean, those days are gone, man. People don't read books like they used to and all that stuff. So that was kind of a dead end. And the bass fishing thing was just what I loved, man. Again, the Lord put it on my heart, and I'm sure, kind of helped me. No, not kind of helped me. Definitely helped me apply my skills to my accumulated skills, to writing. So I wrote for Bass. I was a Bassmaster senior writer, then Bass Fan, then whatever else, and now we're in BassBlaster time.
Yeah. So you came up with the Bass ranking system. I
Yeah.
mean, and there's so many things. And the other thing that I'm going to just mention right now, I believe you've come up with the answer to live scope. I mean, there's so much drama in bass fishing that people have no idea, what happens on. But I'm kind of missing the days of whether we should throw an Alabama rig or whether we shouldn't throw an Alabama rig. But now it's become full scale with the forward facing sonar and stuff like that. But I heard you, I guess it was on BassBlaster or wherever it is. I heard you, but you were talking about, having different classes to fish about that. That's a brilliant idea. I mean, you come up with some brilliant ideas. That's really cool.
Well, that wasn't my idea. There was a couple guys who read the BassBlaster who I asked for ideas, like what can we do? And one guy in particular, I remember, I think it was two or three guys. One guy said, "Hey, and I'm a drag racer. And in drag racing, we have different classes based on whatever it was. I don't drag race. I can't remember." And I was like, that is a great idea. I mean, why can't you listen? If you're running a tournament trail and you got, I don't know, 30 boats in it locally, and three guys have live scope and the rest don't, or forward facing sonar or whatever, like let them fish against each other, and the other 27 guys, they fish against each other, and you can divvy up the prize money or whatever, how you want from there. But instead of moaning and complaining about how unfair it is or how expensive it is, like we gotta, you just do something simple and figure it out.
Man, that's a great, great suggestion. Now that thing has been raging now for however long, forward facing sonar's been out. It's you get some very strong opinions on whether we should or shouldn't be doing that. Now there's a guitar. The only thing I can see in your background is a guitar. Tell us about your musical background. Let's hear about that.
Oh yeah. Well, listen, I grew up in the, high school in the 80s, man. And the 80s was all about fast guitar playing, rock and roll. I mean, still to this day, my favorite band is Van Halen, always will be. And I spent hours and hours and hours and hours playing guitar. I was in bands and all that stuff, So
see, I had no idea that you actually played the guitar. I had no clue about that. So that's not something that you just walk up and start playing or anything. But my son is an avid guitar player, and he's kind of brought me into the whole scene. As a matter of fact, I mentioned earlier we went to a concert last night. We went to see Styx and REO Speedwagon and Loverboy, and he's over there just dissecting the whole thing for me. Like, hey, Dad, see right here is this is the only guys that have like a double bass player, and you're going to see this. It's just a really cool deal. So you actually play the guitar. Now you're a Van Halen fan. Did you like the Sammy Hagar era, or you're a true Van Halen fan? Are you Van Halen or Van Hagar? What do you like?
Yeah, I mean, I liked them both. I definitely liked the Dave era more because it was more raw, it wasn't as polished or as poppy, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
But I love them both. I'd rather listen to that than anything. And it's a lot of rock and roll I can't listen to anymore. I think the Lord has changed my heart about it. I just don't want to listen to it.
Right.
And it seems very lame, the guitar riffs are lame, a lot of them. But Van Halen, like that, Eddie Van Halen was a complete and utter musical genius. That's not even in dispute.
Yeah.
And listening to him is, to me, like, listening to Beethoven, which I do listen to sometimes, or Bach or whatever. It's like every time I listen, I hear 10 new things,
Wow.
it's amazing.
Well, when you talk about a lot of these old rockers, a lot of these guys have come to faith in Christ. I mean, you got guys like Alice Cooper. The lead singer for Foreigner is a believer now. Lead singer for Grand Funk Railroad. Really, really a wild deal. Before I transition this thing into faith here, what's your favorite guitar? What's your best guitar that you play? What's your
man? I have over here a 1970 something Les Paul.
Wow.
Yeah, I like those because some of them have a maple neck. Most Les Pauls have a mahogany neck, but maple's a little brighter and snappier. And then right here, let's see if I can grab it. This was always my favorite color.
Oh man, that's awesome, man.
Of the Van Halens, the Bumblebee.
You're looking like, I was thinking striper there, but
right.
I went through a period. Somebody asked me last night. I was at the concert, and I posted that this was my first concert in 23 years.
Wow.
When I got saved, I stopped listening to all secular music, and for 23, 20 some years, I listened to contemporary Christian music, and my biggest claim to fame, if anything rock and roll, is I was the MC, and I introduced Petra for their last concert of the millennium. Their last concert they did in the 20th century. Chris Wells was the guy that introduced them when they came out on stage that night at it was called the Big God Conference, and so that was my only rock and roll deal. So, but the reason I asked you about the guitars is because this will actually make my son listen to my podcast this week. And so it'll be a great deal. So you really helped me out. So a lot of the rockers have become Christians. There are a lot of guys in the fishing industry that are followers of Christ. Tell us about your faith journey. Okay. Tell us about how you came to know the Lord.
Yeah, man. I always say I didn't have like, a Billy Graham moment where I was hit by a bolt of lightning and floated down to the stage or whatever. That didn't happen for me. So I don't have a specific day or point.
Right.
I will say, looking back on it, like the Lord was, I'm convinced, Chris, that I love bass fishing to get saved. Like that is what it was. Like I look back and
Wow.
see all these signposts along the way of bass fishing, specifically pro bass fishing, that I'm like, oh, okay, I noticed that, and I noticed that, and then he was talking to me through that person and that person. It was unbelievable. But what happened was is I started Bass Fan in 2001, I think it was, and sold it in, I think, 2007. And I was not saved. Okay. So when I sold it, I I expected to feel peace, because it was entrepreneurial. There was, a lot of anxiety and paying other people first. And we made a little pile of money, not enough to retire or anything, but just to kind of take some of the load off. And and at the time you were supposed to build a .com and sell it, and that was a thing. That was an achievement. So I remember expecting to feel peace, and it never came. I didn't get it. And I was racking my brains like, what is going on? Why don't I feel this? And I remember being at a friend's sort of summer, dinner party with our little kids at the time. They're all running around, and I had this vision in my head, Chris. It was, it was almost heavenly. Like there was this, there were clouds, and there was this big chasm in between two sides of clouds, right? And I was on one side, and peace was on the other side. And and I was, it was like boom right there, right? I don't know how long, split second, whatever, but it stuck in my head, and I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. It's spiritual. Like now I understand this. It's spiritual. And I spent the next, I pursued it, man. I didn't know what it meant, so I read books about every religion, Buddha, or so-called religion, Buddhism or whatever, this and that, and they were all junk for me anyway. No offense to anybody else, but listen, it's avoiding stress in life is not spiritual. That's just like behavioral, so I kept coming back to basically Jesus, and a couple things were happening along with that. One is my wife, who was a Catholic, got me to church with the kids. And I was like, dude, I took notes. Like everything this guy was saying, I was taking notes to try and figure things out and learn things with my head. That was the only way I knew how to do it, And then I was also having conversations with guys in bass fishing, or being exposed to things in bass fishing. Like, Shaw Grigsby had a testimonial that I heard that I always remembered. Talked to Jay Yellis, talked to Alton Jones, Andy Crawford, the bass photographer. I watched the Passion of the Christ movie and was talking to them about that, because I expected to be entertained, and I wasn't. I was like floored. I was awed, So all these things were percolating around, and I finally got it. I remember God reaching out to me and me pushing it away one time, which I'm still kind of sick about. And then he kept pursuing me, and I finally accepted him, and bang, that was it, man. Got baptized, and the whole thing. It was great.
Wow, man! I tell you, it's amazing how when you think you're searching for God, that when you find God, or when God finds you, you can look back and see, wow, I can see how he protected me here. I can see how he brought me here. He brought me this person, and I rejected him, but he was still reaching out to me. And you see that there are times when God is always at work, drawing people into himself. And that is an amazing deal. So Christ is the center point of your life. And I have seen you, I really could see the change in you. I saw the change in you, from the time you were, with on loudmouth bass to the time you are now. You went from being loudmouth bass to being, man, you're kind of timid in your, when you get Jay by himself. Now, Jay, you can be anything. You can get up in front. You can be the MC. You can do all of that. But Jay himself, God really, really changed your heart. And you can see, of all the guys I know, you talked about Shaw Grigsby talking about peace, and that's what Shaw would say. Shaw would say, I'd win a tournament and I expected to feel peace, but I never did. And but it, finally when someone, Terry Chip, gave him the testimony of Hank Parker, who's been on the show.
That was it.
And he said, I finally found the peace that I was looking for. And there are a lot of people today, especially in our industry, that think, Christians are kind of these Boy Scout goody two shoes people that just live by a code of rules that they believe. But it's not like that at all, is it? It's not a code of rules. It's a relationship with a personal God.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the rules are Old Testament, right? That was before Jesus. And the people who don't know God live under those rules.
Right. Yeah.
But the people who do know God live as adopted sons and daughters of the kingdom. And that doesn't mean we don't have rules. I mean, rules of decent behavior and everything else, of course, because we're representing Jesus. We're representing the King. I mean, if you were representing your parents, I hope you wouldn't be out there, doing things that they would see and know were terrible, cussing at people and doing whatever. Now, I'm not saying I'm an angel. I wish I was in terms of behavior. Dude, it is for me a battle every day. I walk away from so many conversations saying, oh man, I wish I didn't say that. I wish I did say that. I had a little bit of a rough childhood in some ways, nothing to complain about, but there's just some damage. Everybody has damage.
Everybody's got baggage.
Yeah. So it's a battle, and I'm just glad to have the literally God-given wherewithal to endure it and to triumph in it, when I do. And it's not me, man. Like when people say like they see anything good in me, I'm like, man, that's not me.
Yeah.
If you see something, if I say something good or do something good, that's the Lord, man. That is not me.
That's exactly right. I tell you, when you talk about, there are a lot of people in our industry, in every industry, that believe that you've got to be good. You got to be good. And that Christians think they're better than other people. It's not that at all. I know with my life, I know I'm worse than everybody else. And if it wasn't for his mercy and his grace, and the Apostle Paul said it this way, he said, the things that I want to do, those are the things I don't do. And the things that I don't want to do, those are the things I end up doing. And so I found this at work with me. There are two sides. And when you come to Christ, you not only have your old nature, but you have the new nature God's given you. And the one that you feed is the one that's going to grow. And so there's always a tension, back and forth. And people think, well, Christians think they're perfect. No, not at all. Christians know that they can't be good enough for God, and only God's Son has done that for us. And so it's like going to the hospital, which I did recently. You don't get well and go to the hospital. You go to the hospital to get well. You go to Christ to get well. And so you've experienced that in your life. And man, what an awesome testimony and an awesome missionary you are just in the bass fishing world. And I appreciate that so much. So I'm going to transition now, because we've only got a few more minutes, but we're going to transition into a segment I call the Sasquatch in the Room. Okay. And so that's what we're going to talk about right now, because you and I have so much in common. I'm a Southern boy, you're a Northern boy, but we believe in Jesus. We love bass fishing, and we have one more unique deal, and I'm just going to let it out here. Both of us are really interested in the Bigfoot. We're interested in the Bigfoot and the Sasquatch. You might see, now I love your deal because you beat me to the punch I believe your company is called Sasquatch Media. Is that right? Is that right?
It is.
How did that happen, man? How did I know how it happened for me, but I'm interested in how did it happen for you, man? What's the deal?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote that novel. That was a Sasquatch novel,
And man, it
I
was a
mean,
great book. It's a great book. If you have it, let me tell you, people, you can still go on Amazon and get a copy of Dark Woods by J. Kumar, and it is a great read. You need to do that. You did a lot of research for that book. I could tell you really
I
did.
I did. I mean, that's just my nature, right? Like even since I got saved, I am pursuing God. Like I want to know as much as I possibly can,
Right.
because I feel like I wasted, 40 years or so not doing it. So I got to make up for that time. But in terms of the Sasquatch thing, so of course, but maybe everybody else doesn't, that I heard one,
Yeah.
in New Jersey, High Point State Park, camping with my much younger siblings. I won't give the whole story unless you want me to, but there
I
is,
love the story.
huh?
I love the story. I love you.
Do you want the story
Yeah,
now?
let's hear it. Let's hear the story. I mean, I think people, well, you and I talk about it all the time. We talk about, we always make references, and people, anytime there's a Sasquatch sighting, I get tagged in 100 posts on Facebook. Okay, hey, Chris Wells, check this out. So tell us a little bit about the story. I like to hear that.
Yeah, so I was,
Excuse
I
me.
think, 21 years old, and I have a brother and sister who are 14 and 15 years younger than me, respectively. Okay. So I told my parents, listen, I'm taking them camping, just overnight, one night. And they're like, okay. They're worried, of course, they're little, but they trusted me. So we live in New Jersey. We drive to High Point State Park, which is the highest point in New Jersey. It's the Appalachians, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
We go up there, and there's these little, they're kind of mostly ponds. We're fishing, we're catching bass like this long,
Yeah.
stunted bass, and it doesn't matter. They're little kids, they're having fun. And so we go into the campground, right, at night. And the campground was, if you could picture it, there's a road that goes past the campground. And the campground was like this circle or oval around another pond. And other than where the road went, around the oval on all sides, the kind of the hill went up, So
Right.
it was like a canyon sort of, but inside of it was like a short canyon, but inside was this pond, right? So the road around the campground went around the pond, and between the road and the pond were the campsites, right?
Right.
So everybody was camping, right where the road came in. And I'm like, we're not doing that. So we go all the way around, and we're camping by ourselves, set up the tent, the whole thing, and roasting hot dogs or whatever we were doing by the fire. And right at around dusk, directly across from us, across the pond, was the loudest, longest howl. I mean, I'm even getting chills right here thinking about it. I had ever heard in my life, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is way before the internet, way before any Bigfoot shows,
Right.
other
Yeah.
than the Bigfoot on the $6 million man kind
Right.
of
Yeah.
thing.
That was a good episode. Yeah.
Yeah, but nobody thought of it. It wasn't on everybody's mind or the tip of their tongue or whatever. So I remember my siblings would be like, "What is that?" And I was like, "Oh, it's a moose." Knowing full well it wasn't a moose, but I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
There are no moose in New Jersey. No known animal could make a sound that loud and that long. I mean, there's just no way. I described it later as if you had an NFL lineman with at least 3 times the lung capacity and a PA system in the middle of the woods, you could maybe get there.
Wow.
Maybe get there.
Wow.
So then it got dark. We're still by the fire hanging out. And then closer to the left now, up on the ridge or the hill, same exact sound, right? Same question, same answer. It's a moose. So don't think anything of it. We go to sleep. It was raining that night. And we're sleeping, and in the middle of the night, dude, one more time, and this time it's like where we parked the truck on the road going around the campground. It sounds like it's that close. It was so loud, Chris, that my siblings, like right here sleeping next to me, if I was yelling at them at the top of my lungs, they could not hear what I was saying. That's how loud it was.
Wow.
So I didn't remember any of this until years later, when the internet came out and I heard a howl that was supposedly from Washington State of a
Right.
Sasquatch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
The Seattle sounds. Yeah.
every hair on my body stood up, and I called my brother and sister, who were teenagers at the time, and I'm like, listen to this.
Yeah.
And it freaked my brother out so bad. He was on the high school soccer team that he wouldn't relieve himself in the woods next to the field anymore. He was so freaked out.
Wow.
But there is no doubt, like, that is no other animal. There is no doubt. I mean, no other known animal on planet Earth can make that sound that loud for that long, like that. Period. End of story.
Wow. Wow. A lot of people don't realize that. And I'm a big history guy, and I like to research a lot of things as well. And, you've got the New Jersey Devils there. Well, that comes from the Pine Barrens are in New Jersey. A lot of people don't know how rural parts of New Jersey are. And I actually read a novel one time, and, that New Jersey Devil, that's a part of the lore that there's something out there. There's something, in those woods and something going on. So that's fascinating. I got hooked on the Bigfoot deal. I think I watched Leonard Nimoy on, he had a probe In Search Of, and I watched that. And then I saw the Patterson Gimlin film, and I was hooked. And I know that one of my goals, and, James Niggemeyer always says I'm crazy, but if I ever see one, I'm going to run and grab him by the leg, and I'm going to hang on. I always tell him, if you find out that Chris died, check my stomach contents, because I'm going to be like biting on that joker's leg, trying to prove he's real. So I'm always looking out for the Sasquatch. Well, man, that's awesome. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I know you're a busy guy and you got a lot of things going on, and you took the time today to come and be on the Basschaplain Fishing Podcast. Well, the last thing we're going to do, man, if you got an impersonation, we usually ask our guests to impersonate another Bass Pro, and we've had so many people do so many. We've had Cliff Crochet, we've had Tommy Biffle, we've had actually Hank Parker actually did a great impression of Roland Martin. Probably the best impression I've heard is a Turkey guy, Mark Prudhomme, did Gerald Swindle. It was like he was channeling Gerald Swindle through the impersonation. But if you got one for us, if you got somebody, you can and understand that when you impersonate somebody, that is the highest form of flattery that you can give somebody. So who you got for us?
Yeah, dude, I am not an impersonator. I cannot do it. I wish I could. I really do. And I mean, we have so many personalities, and distinct ways that they are, Aaron
let's do it like this then. Tell me, when you think about all the interviews you've done, and who is someone who is a character that you went, wow, I'm glad I interviewed that person? I mean, in the fishing industry, who's that one that jumps out at you? And,
I don't, you know what? The one that jumps out at me is Rick Clunn.
Rick Clunn. Yeah.
I mean, he's like Aaron Martin's, those two, where you never really know what you're going to get, but whatever comes out is awesome.
Man, I tell you, people know this, and Rick probably doesn't know this at all, but when I was in seminary, I remember distinctly, I was sitting beside a tree at Southwestern Seminary, and we had this real distinguished professor. His works had been compared to C.S. Lewis. His name was Calvin Miller, Dr. Calvin Miller. And I remember he was walking past me one day, and I had my Bible open, but inside the Bible, I had Bass Wars, and I was reading about Rick Clunn. And he said, oh, it's so good to see a young Christian man in love with God, reading the Word of God. And I was like, yes, sir, you don't know, but I'm reading about how Rick Clunn is talking to me about how to bounce a crankbait off of off a deal like that. And so he has been, he's been one of my heroes, in the bass fishing world, since I started. I mean, there's nobody who's done more in the sport and for the sport, Rick Clunn. And one of the things he's done lately is he has shown that you can be 73 years old and still win a bass tournament. I mean, how in the world he is an absolute wonder, and that's really, really wild. So yeah, I could see how Rick Clunn would be the guy that would stand out among all other fishermen. And so really cool deal. Jay, man, I appreciate you being on today, and I look forward to BassBlaster. Tell us about BassBlaster. If there's a person out here who hasn't subscribed to BassBlaster yet, how do they do that? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, the best way is to go to bassblaster.com or .rocks and click on sign up for the email and do it that way. We are starting to roll out texting, which is a little bit better than email in a way. You can do that too. And actually, I don't even know if the text sign up is on the website yet, but that's the best way.
Yeah. And if you're a deer hunter, you can go to Deer Blaster. And that's one of my goals, is to get a picture into Deer Blaster. That's what I want to do. I want to kill one where I can say, hey, Jay, check this out. The Basschaplain skewered one, but that's probably a long shot for me. But man, I appreciate you, buddy. I love you. And ladies and gentlemen, this is Jay Kumar. Go subscribe to the BassBlaster. You will be blessed if you do. And I want to thank you for listening to today's podcast. This is the podcast where faith and fishing hook up, and we will see you next week.